How to import images and do a simple 3D model. In this case, it's a chess piece. So here we go. So one thing to realize about Maya is that you have multiple cameras and multiple perspectives. So we have a top view, a front view, a side view, and a perspective view. These are our 4 panels over here, and you can get to them by clicking on that. If you need to get into one particular panel and zoom in, you can just hit the space bar and it'll make the workspace just that one panel. In this case, it's now the perspective panel. If I want to go back into the others, I can just hit this panel layout, this quad view I call it. And this is where we want to do to import our images. So here we go. So we're going to go up to View, Image Plane, Import an Image. And I'm in the top, so I'm going to go into my folder. And make sure I click on the top image. So in this case, it's night top. And I hit open. And here it does it, makes it perfectly in the center at 0, 0. Here you can see it in the perspective. And now we need to keep lining up. So we're going to get a front view and a side view as well. So again, I'm going to go down in this panel. Same thing, hit view, go into image plane, import image. And this is the front. So I'm going to go to my folder where I have my images. And import the front. And there's the front. Now I'm going to go into the side view. You can see them stacking up over here in perspective. Go into view, image plane, and import image. And go to that folder. So wherever you saved it, desktop, Maya chess piece folder for me. This is going to be the side, and we're going to hit open. And then there we go. Now I have top, front, and side. Okay. Now this is what I'm going to do. You can see these darker lines right here are 0, 0. And so what I'm going to try and do is this one is a little bit off kilter. I'm going to use my move tool over here. This is the move tool, square with the 4 triangles. And as soon as the move tool's up, you see these arrows with different colors. So there's red, blue in this view, and then there's also a green one. I'm just going to line it up. Whoop, wrong one. Make sure you have that right one selected. So image plane 1. Okay, and I'm going to move it over so it's dead center. So now the middle of this is also on the middle of this axis right here. Okay, so depending on the image, it might not always line up perfectly. I'm going to go back in, so you're going to want to line them up. So now I'm going to go into side view and zoom in, and you can see it's a little off. I'm using the image center. It's nice and easy. Command Z, undo. Make sure you have the right image selected. And I'm going to get this centered. And then notice this is the bottom, but this darker line here is 0 for the bottom. So I want to bring this up to that bottom. There we go. Go back over to that view. That looks pretty good. Now we got to go to side, and let's adjust the side. So Command Z. Don't forget to switch what image you're actually. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And even more important than getting it perfectly lined up here at 0, 0 is lining up with the images themselves. So now I'm going to go into perspective view, and I'm just going to double check, hold option and rotate. It's a little off, so it looks like this one. Well, just want the one image. Image 3. This one just down a little. It's pretty close. Remember, this is reference images. I'm going to move it here in the middle, that's for sure. So I can come over here at translation, make sure it's at 0. There we go. So, and I'm just looking. It looks pretty lined up. Pretty even across the board. Okay, so now that I've got it lined up, hit F to reframe. Oh, looks pretty good. Checking everything down there. Okay, so now that I got it all lined up, it's pretty close. Maybe bring this a little bit forward. There you go. Okay, now I'm going to start sculpting. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these shapes, right, and try and figure out what are the basic shapes that make up this whole thing. And so right away, I'm looking at the front and the side view, and I can tell that it's a cylinder. I know it's a round, and so it's flat on the bottom and flat on the top, so I'm just going to create a cylinder. And so now that I clicked it, I'm going to start here on the top view and just pull it out till it's about the size of the image. And then I'm going to come over here to perspective, and I'm going to use that to pull it up. And now I'm looking at the front view to get an idea, right? So I was looking over in this direction here while I was pulling it up. So now I can just look and say, okay, that looks pretty good, actually, right from the get-go. If I had to, I could just stay in object mode, right-click, and you get object mode, edge mode, vertex mode. And I can manipulate it, I could scale it down, I can move it and get it lined up, okay? Next piece, so let's double check. Looks like it's pretty good also in the side view. So now I'm gonna look at that next shape, and this next shape here is a torus. So let's go back to quad view. Now I'm gonna take a torus, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna come here and draw, undo. I'm going to come here and draw from the middle about that size. And right now, I'm getting the kind of width that I want and the shape that I want. So I'm pulling it out a little bit farther than maybe I normally would. But now I can manipulate it a little bit better by using this scale tool. So now I can scale it down and bring it in, and it looks a little bit better. And notice I'm doing it inside as well. So I'm going back and forth, bring it in there, something like that. Go back to front view, I'm gonna move it a little bit. So I'm gonna put it on top. And I want to scale it a little bit more. That's looking a little nicer. And remember, these are just reference images to make it as nice as possible. Okay. Check it from the side. And so the general rule is if it's good from the front, it's good from the side, then it's going to be good in perspective. So that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go just check it in perspective. And everything's looking pretty good. It's lining up really good. Can double check. So over here is our attribute and our layer editor, and I'm just double checking X, Y, and Z translations and making sure that they're all at 0. 0. So we want them perfectly. Oh, Command Z. There we go. So I'm just double checking and I'm kind of fixing them, making sure they're extra perfect. F. So now this next shape, I'm looking at it from the front. Okay, it's kind of a curved here, but it's still a cylinder. It's just got some curved edges. So what I'm going to do is, again, go back and create with my cylinder. I'm going to drag and pull it out. I drag it a little bit bigger because I can always change it, but I want to see, right, about how big it is. That looks good. I'm going to move it on up here in the front. And then I want to start scaling. So I need to bring it in this way. And I need to bring it in this way from the side. Okay, I'm going over here, X translation 0, and it'll line up perfectly. Z is 0. So it's perfectly in the middle there. Okay, maybe a little bit shorter. And use my move tool. There we go. So something more like that. So one thing you notice is this has got a straight side and I need to start to curve that out. So now I'm going to start inserting what they call edge loops. So I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, insert an edge loop. And all I'm going to do, this is in front mode. I'm just going to click equidistance, about equidistance of the shape. So each of these new shapes that I just made, right, are about the same. So now I can go into vertex mode and I can click select all those vertex. Whoop, I'm still in edge loop tool, so I want to actually scale tool, vertex mode, click and select the vertex, and I'm going to drag that out to about where it goes. And now I'm going to do the same with the others. So I'm going to click and drag the top vertexes, and I'm going to scale it in a little. It's somewhere in there. And now I'm going to click and select this group and scale it in a little. And now you can see I've got that kind of edge, and I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe go back into object mode. Whoop. And move the whole thing down just a touch. Okay, and so it looks good from the front. And so now I'm going to go to the side. Make sure that the side is good too. So I hit F, reframes. Okay, so I'm going to go vertex, make sure I'm scaling. Select the bottom vertexes. And I'm going to scale them out. I'm going to take this one, the top, make it a little bit more in. Looks like I got to do a little bit more work from the side. And so I'm just selecting that entire row to create this kind of arch. Maybe I want to select both of these bottom rows. Just bring them out a little bit more. There we go. And again, I can go back in, and as I'm doing this, check in perspective mode. And it's pretty good all the way around. So like I said, if you can line it up from front and side, then in perspective, it should be good all the way around, especially when we're dealing with things in the round like this chess piece. One thing I forgot to tell you guys that will help is I can shift select all of these images and go to layers and then create from selected. So now I can actually turn off the layer of my reference images and just look at my piece itself. And so far, it's pretty good. And so I can get them out of the way, especially if I'm checking or if they're in the way of the modeling. I can just keep messing with those. So there is that. There is that. And you can see we're starting to build this thing up. So now it's going to go One more, looks like one more torus. So I'm going to go torus, click on the torus tool, and I'm going to come in and build it up. Okay, and we're going to use the scale tool, scale it down. I'm going to scale it wider first, then down, then bring it in, and then down a little bit more, and then move it up. And it helps, I go over the translation, right? So X in this case is 0, tab. Z is also 0, and it's perfectly centered at those axes of 0. Scale it a little bit more from the side. And move up. And now I want to scale it out. There we go. Maybe just down a little bit more. And then from the side here. And it's looking pretty good. Cool. Again, check it in perspective. Option. It's looking okay. All seem connected. Go back into quad. And now we're going to move up with a little bit more complex shapes. So now we got the bottom part of this chess piece modeled, right? The base of it. And now we're looking at the neck or the body of it. And so it's a little bit more complex of a shape, but it's same principles. You're looking at it and going, okay, what of these shapes, right? A sphere, a cube, a cylinder, a cone, or a torus can we actually make this out of? And so this is actually mostly round and in the shape of a cylinder. So I'm going to make another cylinder. And again, it's draw it out from the middle. I like to make it a little bit bigger, pull up from perspective, and I'm going to get about the height that I need. So again, I'm looking here in these windows, front and side, and I'm modeling. So I'm bringing in the width and bringing in that depth, so somewhere like that. And I'm going to move it so it's up like that. And maybe I want to scale it back down and then move it again. And it's pretty close. So again, I'm going to check here, make sure it's perfectly at 0 and it's perfectly centered on my piece. Okay, so we look at it. It's pretty close to the top there. Looking at it from side view, right? It's kind of the middle part. I look and try and size it so I don't have to do too much on either side, that it kind of fits in the middle of whatever this bigger shape is. So let's go to front view and just model the front because that's the easiest. So hit the space bar, select this, and we need to insert some edge loops so we can get this nice curve to the bottom. So again, we're going to go to Mesh Tools, insert an edge loop, and again, equidistant along a line. So I'm just putting in a few. Maybe one there. Cool. So I'm lining up with that. And now I can start to scale out my vertexes. So I'm going to go right to, actually first I'm going to use a scale, then right click vertex, and I'm going to start at the top, bring it in. I'm actually going to move it up just a tad too. And now I'm going to do the next one, and I'm going to scale using the scale tool. And that one looks pretty good. So now I'm going to select this one, bring it out a little bit, and you can see I'm now starting to get that nice curve. I'm just using the image to get the edges and the sides of my 3D model to match up with it. And make sure I select all these. And there it is. So that looks pretty decent. That's just from the front, so of course I got to go back and double check the side, and this is going to get a little bit more complex. So I'm going to select all the top vertexes, and then I'm going to move this over here, and then I'm going to scale it down a little bit. That's kind of where it needs to be. Then I'm going to select these. I'm going to actually move them first, because this might just be pretty good. Maybe just scale it up a little bit to fit. Then I'm going to select the next one down, and so I'm just working top down to that base. You can work bottom up. It doesn't really matter. I guess it's just personal preference. So I'm starting to scale it out. Need to move it a little bit. And scale it again. Scale it out. Move it. So I'm always pushing it into the middle, so that way when I scale it out, it'll meet the edges. So this one I can, let's move more middle. So I got about the same space on this side, same space on this side. Now I can scale it. It fits pretty perfectly. Now I've got this one, and I'm going to scale out. Okay, and then the bottom one, I'm going to scale it out as well. So I'm happy with the front side, like that's a nice curve, but you notice I didn't quite get to the back end there. So I'm just going to select these back, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to take these last 4, and I'm just going to move them to that back part. I can then select this straight through and move it over a little bit. One thing you want to do is you want to try and make sure that all these shapes, as it changes, is nice and fluid throughout. So all of this, I could then move it down just a tad, and that lines up, I think, a little bit better. So I lined up this vertex with that corner there. So again, go back in to perspective. All right, I'm going to take this off, and now I just want to kind of see what it looks like, and it's got a nice solid shape to it. Cool. Now we just got to do the head. So going back into front, whoop, turn on my layers. There we go. So this particular one, I look at the side. So this is roughly just a square. So I'm really looking at the side now and seeing that it's definitely more of a rectangle. So I'm going to go into this cube, and we're again, this one, I'm just going to drag it out, kind of like the shape. Oh. Delete it. Let's draw it again. So I'm going to draw it this way to match the head a little bit. If you can't pull it up in perspective, just alter the angle a little bit. So there we go. So now I've got that height, and I can move this up and over. And then I can scale it a little bit. And now I'm just kind of modeling in the side view. So we'll just scale it up just a tad. Okay. There we go. So you could do a couple different ways. You can model it this way, or I can make it maybe a little bit bigger and then come up and add my edge loops. So maybe I'll just start like this, because it pretty much fills the whole head except for those little ears. So, but I've got to get some edge loops in because I need some more pieces to work with. Oh, don't forget to line it up. Here it is way over here in front view. So we want to actually move it over so it matches up where that head is. So again, you can double check in XYZ, 0, so it's perfectly centered with all the other objects. So selected object. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to insert edge loops, mesh tools, insert edge loop. Whoop, make sure that we have an actual object. Okay. And I'm going to put one here. And I'm going to put one here. And then I'm going to put some here so I can get the arcing of this. So I'm going to maybe go like, I don't know, one there, and one there. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different spaces. 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to get into modeling in that vertex mode. So I'm going to go back to vertex, make sure you no longer have that edge loop. So I'm going to go into the move tool and vertex, and I'm going to start selecting, how do I want to do, what's the easiest way? I'm going to start and select this one all the way through and push it through. So now you can see it's kind of built up and the back at the same time. I need another edge loop here because I want to bring that down. So they're going to be really close together, these edge loops. So there's going to be another mesh tool. Insert edge loop. So I'm going to put one really close. So then when I go back into vertex mode in that move, I can select just that one and I can bring it back down in there. Now you can kind of see, right? And so now I can grab this one and I can move it even higher and pull it up a little bit. There we go. I'm now going to do the back side, move these in and down. And now I'm going to bring this one in. So I'm just finding that back shape of the head. Now I'm selecting these, and then selecting these. Let's put it there. We can fix that later. Okay, so there's that. I'm now going to select the front two because I want an equidistance, and I'm just going to kind of move them down a little bit. Actually, you know what? Let's select, even better than that, let's select all of these and scale it and move it. So now they're equidistant when I scale, and that looks a little bit better. That's a little nicer shape. Okay, so that's from the side view. If I wanted to, you know, I could scale it up just a tad and then move it just a tad. There we go. And so that's good from side view, and so now I got to do that in the front view. So front view is going to be a little more difficult because it's basically covering up the reference image, but I remember the reference image, and so I'm going to scale again, and I'm going to bring in this like this. The height is already good, but I know that it comes in, and so I want to make it a little bit narrower. If you have to, you can go back to that image plane, whatever one it was. Is that it? No, image plane 2. And I could just move it out just for a reference. That's pretty close. So I'm going to go back into perspective mode, And I'm going to turn off the image, and I'm just going to kind of rotate around and take a look at it. And it looks pretty good. One part that I want to fix maybe is the width of the head. So maybe I'm going to go into where it connects to that neck. I'm going to maybe pull these out or narrow those. I think I'm going to narrow, what do I want to do? Narrow the neck. I could just maybe move this whole object, go back into object mode. Whoop. And what happens if I just, so I'm just making like, there we go, better decisions. There it's touching. I could go into vertex and I could select this one, just this one, and hit shift in this one. So it's just these two vertexes. So if I shift select, don't create a bounding box, don't drag and create that box, just literally click that one and then shift and click that one. And now I can do a little bit of work. Let's see what happens when we pull it in and scale them in. We need to scale it out actually. Go back to move. Selecting this one, move it in. Select this one, move it in. Looks pretty good there. And now I'm actually going to go back to this shape, vertex, and I'm just going to, now I'm modeling in that perspective, I'm just going to select all of these, actually do it from the side so you know that you're selecting all of those. So just those, but then I'm going to come back to perspective mode and I'm going to scale things to make it feel and fit that neck a little bit better. So I'm going to bring it in this way and then so that looks better. Actually, now I'm just going to bring out the back of the head. So we'll go back to here, vertex mode. And so you're just kind of tidying things up, making sure that they all line up. And I'm going to move this back. Hit F. There you go. And check in perspective mode. Not bad. I'll show you some other ways in which we can actually weld these joints together so it makes it nice and smooth and even more like one piece. But for our first 3D model, pretty good, pretty solid. So you can go back, click off, hit F, object, right? And there is our first little 3D model. So remember, the biggest thing is just make sure that you are looking at the big shapes, trying to figure out what those big shapes are that you can manipulate. Is it a sphere? Is it a cube? Is it a cylinder? Is it a cone? Or is it a torus? And then start manipulating and modeling based off of that general shape.